for their other role on this planet. And, I know you'll understand what I'm saying here, and I hope that the listeners do at least get some sense of what I'm trying to say. But this is where I find it quite profound, that it's taking us to understanding our connection to these beings that are part of us, and as we're part of them, as the little 8-year-old told me once, but Mummy, we are the aliens. And if you can call, to me, it isn't that, the aliens to a lot of star kids or new humans are really the human beings, not our off-world visitors.
I try to tell people that it's our ancient ancestors and it's us, and we need to drop the aliens. One thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was that it's been my understanding as well that there are so many people, I guess you call them sleepers, that are more ET in their soul than they are humans, and they're running the personality and body program and not in contact with the higher aspects of self or the bigger picture. And there seems to be a movement right now where these initiators, and I know that the Orion Council of Light, the ones that initiated me, when they did their thing, they hit me with 3 gold balls of light, one after another, and then I had full memory of my past lives, both on Earth and off-world as well, and I guess this is what you'd refer to as the sleepers waiting for the big initiation.
Absolutely, and my understanding is from the work that I've done and the many regressions is that it's like for a while it's not necessarily helpful for you to be aware of that because it gets in the way of what you're doing on this planet at this particular time until it is time for you to realize that bigger purpose. Many of those that have had that catalyst, that awakening event where they are aware of not only their past lives but their mandate for coming to this planet and what they hope to achieve on this planet. And like yourself, James, I realize that, these encounters are not, what I call the Whitley Strieber classic abduction kind of scenario is a very small, in fact, minute part of the encounters that are going on planetary-wide for so many of these more ET and what I call the less human, the ones that have this dual sense and relate more to their family off-world than they do certainly to Homo sapiens, and find it very difficult to be here. And many of them say, I just don't want to be here. I can't. I find it very difficult to understand humans and how barbaric and how primitive they are. And they really, really struggle to actually stay on the planet. They literally want to vacate.
Yeah, I know a lot of humans right now. I'm seeing, and I'm talking about my own part human. We've been very, very programmed, and we've forgotten the basics. Thou shalt not kill, things like that. Just the basics about being a decent human being and being kind to each other and living in harmony with each other and the planet. And these kids have those basics down, and they see very clearly what's going on in the outer world and how off track it is. And I know they're here to shift that, to change that consciousness and redirect this downward spiral that we're on into the upward spiral, into spiritual evolution, you might say.
Oh, absolutely. It was quite fascinating for me. It was a 13-year-old girl that I worked with, and one of the things she said to me, she said, what's difficult for me is what I'm being taught at school isn't correct. And she said, and often what the teacher's saying and what she's thinking is completely different. And she said, and sometimes what she's thinking isn't very nice. And I remember thinking at the time, a lot of the less aware humans are not. They don't understand the abilities of the children that they're often teaching, and that, I'm sure that teacher would have been horrified to think that this young 13-year-old actually had access to understanding what was going on with her, but this is the case. Many of them switch off or switch down because they find it so hard to be on this planet, and they try and play the game, even though it's really hard for them. But this also takes us into what we call dysfunctions, and that's the ADHDs, the Asperger's, and the autistic, which I now really have come to suspect maybe other programs. And what I'm saying is that I've connected with quite a number of those that have been diagnosed with ADHD, and there's a gentleman in Hong Kong called Neil Gold who has written his story, and he calls it Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind, because he said he's always seen things differently. And I honestly suspect that what some of our off-world visitors are doing is actually creating programs that make it harder for us to be programmed. That are actually making it, creating a way of getting past the human programming so that they can become, or find it more easier to become aware of their multidimensional selves. And certainly I've met those that have had Asperger's and also autistic children, and parents have told me that they see angels, they see spirits, they see these beings, and often don't talk about it, and unless they're given the okay. So it really does make me suspect that there are other programs that we may, as I say, call dysfunctions. Interestingly, autistic children respond to something that their parents, sometimes find it difficult to communicate, but the one thing they all say they respond to is unconditional love. And I find that quite an interesting, for me, it sort of pressed that red flag button that says this is important. And it's showing us that is the ultimate communication, which is unconditional love, which we have to understand on this planet in its fullest sense.
I mean, you almost described my life story with the 13-year-old, because I had the same thing that happened to me as a child. I knew what people were thinking, and I could feel what they're feeling, and what they were saying wasn't congruent.
Yeah.
And then I totally bought into social consciousness and went through that program, and then after the drowning, I went back into that same state of mind I had, as a kid. And boy, I was in commercial real estate at the time.
Yeah.
And dealing with predators and people, all they were doing is feeding off each other and finding different ways of screwing you. And it was just, I couldn't do it anymore. I sold everything I got out of there. And so my heart goes out to these kids that are coming in. And it's one of the reasons why I built this center, to help people understand what's going on and help some of these, people that are hooked up with the higher dimensions, to find a place that is functional, that does support them, in their higher awareness.
The thing that I get all the time in the phone calls to me is often what I call, the star kids. They may be in their 20s, 30s, or even 40s or whatever, and they're saying how alone and isolated they feel, and many of them, because of that, say, I've just not wanted to be here, and desperately seeking others like themselves so they can connect and not feel so isolated. And one of the things that I've actually said, which I think I know you'll relate to, is that when they fully accept themselves, because so many of them are still in that place of, conflict between their third dimensional world and their greater reality. I said, as soon as you start to integrate and accept who you are and accept those parts of you at the moment that, society doesn't accept, but you have to, I said, you'll be in a different frequency, and you will then draw to you those that are on the same page, that understand, that are like yourself, and it'll be like energy attracting like energy. But while you're still in conflict and not owning that part of yourself, you are then, you are not going to meet the ones that you most need to meet to feel whole. Mm-hmm. So it is about accepting that side of yourself, but often just talking to one person that will say, look, this is okay, seems to make a huge difference to so many of them, and they start to really look and honor that part of themselves. I mean, one of them that I've been speaking to recently is a policeman, and all his life, his parents basically completely destroyed his sense of self by denying the encounters that he had, the experiences he had. He was greatly abused emotionally and physically because he would talk about them. And then, of course, he goes into the police force, and again, it's all about, the third dimensional world and all of this other stuff that he'd experienced he had to deny. And it's only now he's starting to realize that all of that ultimately it had been making him deny what he knew was, in essence, part of himself. And now there's this huge healing and integration going on, as he's saying, and I've always known it, and I've always